Hi guys, welcome to Decode Mains 2025, and I hope you people are as excited as me. Now, this video is mainly about decoding the ethics paper of UPSC Mains 2025. Now, this is part 1 of the ethics video of Decode Mains 2025, and the part 2 of the same video will be released today at 5 o'clock. In this part 1 of the video, I will be discussing in detail about the section A, that is the theoretical part of ethics, and section B, that is the case study part of ethics. And at 5 o'clock today, the video will be released where you and I will be writing the ethics question and answers together. So I hope that you will be ready at 5 o'clock with pen and paper to write answers with me. Before we start to write the answers together, it is very important for you to understand the mindset of UPSC in setting the ethics paper of 2025, and for that this video becomes very important. So please make sure that you watch the video in full and be ready by 5 o'clock to start writing answers with me. Now, the PDF that I've used to analyze as well as the PDF that I've used to write answers upon, I've already uploaded it in my Telegram channel. You can download it from my Telegram channel, and the link for the Telegram channel is in the description below. Look at the analysis of the ethics video, and I can promise you that no one across the country is able to decipher and discuss in such detail the ethics paper of the UPSC Mains 2025. So one request for my student community is, once you have seen the entire analysis video, please put in the comment section what was your biggest takeaway. So finally guys, this program is going to be a game changer. Take it from me, just complete one paper and see the level of confidence that it will do when you complete one complete paper with me, writing the answers with me. But if I have to maintain that energy levels to give you such high quality content, then the responsibility lies within you to make sure that you please share this video with as many people as possible across your community. By doing that, you will not only help me, but you will also help thousands of aspirants across the country who will get access to quality content and will pick up the pen and write answers with me and realize how exactly you should write an answer to get maximum marks in the mains exam. With that, let us start off with the analysis guys. I know that you will love the analysis because nowhere have they done it at such level of detail. Now, the PDF that I have used, I have already uploaded it in the Telegram channel and you can go there and download it. More importantly, once you have seen this video, once you have seen the analysis, I want you to comment what was your biggest takeaway. And more important than that is, at 5 p.m. part 2 of the video will be released where you and I will be writing the answers together. So if you have to equip yourself for that part 2 of the video, you should make sure that you complete this video right away. So I'll see you at 5 o'clock guys. I hope you'll enjoy that. I'll be looking forward for the comment to see what was your biggest takeaway. Enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to this session of Decode Mains 2025 where we write mains answers together. Now, in this video, we will discuss about the GS4 ethics paper of Mains 2025. Now, very important are few things that you should keep in your mind. Just by collecting examples and definitions, you will not be able to write good answers, so keep that in your mind. The second is the changing trends within the ethics paper, that they are more inclined towards applied ethics. The third very important thing is the answers are becoming a little more analytical. That is, the questions demand you to give a type of analysis that should be in line with ethical vocabulary and moral reasoning. When I say analytical, it should not be just multi-dimensional the way we do it in other papers. Here it should be a little bit more elaborative and it should constitute the ethical vocabulary and the moral reasoning. Now all this you will understand if you just give time and look at the analysis that I'm going to do, and after that when we start with the detailed discussion of the answers, I am going to first tell you the structuring of the answer and I'm going to write the answer on my own and you're going to write with me. Now what happens when you write with me is, you're going to develop the ethical vocabulary, you're going to develop the language that you have to bring in the ethics paper, and more importantly you will learn how to create the dimensions that are actually relevant for ethics. So I hope you are ready and I hope you can take the pen and paper and start writing with me when I start the detailed discussion. Now before I go to the detailed discussions, first let me just give you a brief bird's eye view of what I think of this GS4 paper of 2025 mains, and then we will just look through all the questions once, including the case studies, and then jump to detailed discussions of every question. Alright guys, now this is my analysis of the GS4 ethics paper of UPSC Mains 2025. The first is emphasis towards applied ethics. Emphasis towards applied ethics. Now when I say emphasis towards applied ethics, I will give you the example. See, 1A, that is social media and ethical issues in it. The second is 2B, that is
environmental clearance in ecologically sensitive areas of border regions. Ecologically sensitive areas of border regions. Again, this is a question on ethical dilemma. A very interesting but a very conceptually demanding question. The next is 4A, that is social re-engineering of welfare schemes. A very interesting question that they have given. Social re-engineering of welfare schemes. Again, here you have to connect your ethical vocabulary of the necessity of social engineering of welfare schemes. If you don't connect that ethical vocabulary to that social engineering, you will not get marks. How shall we do that? You will listen. How shall we do it? How shall we do that? We are going to write the answer together and we are going to understand the demand and exactly how to cater to the demand of the question in a proper ethical format, or in a proper ethical word limit with ethical vocabulary. That we are going to learn very soon, but this is another very important and very interesting question that they have asked. The next is 6B. In 6B they have asked, India going on to become an economic superpower, what can be the challenges and recommendations? Okay, so these are the 4 important applied ethics questions that they have asked. So they have carried forward this trend of applied ethics from the previous year to this year. If you can remember, in the last Decode Ethics 2024, I had discussed about applied ethics and I told you to keep an eye on applied ethics. In the last year, they had asked 4 questions. One is artificial intelligence. The second is they had asked about Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. The third, they had asked about global warming and climate change. And the fourth, they had asked about Mission Karma Yogi. So these were the 4 applied questions that they had asked in the previous year, and in this year they have carried forward the same trend of inclining towards applied ethics. So there is going to be questions that are going to be coming on applied ethics in the future as well. So as an aspirant who's appearing for UPSC Mains 2026, you should be practicing a lot of applied ethics question, because applied ethics question requires you not only to by heart the definitions and examples, but use those definitions in applicability of these issues that are happening in your surroundings. So that requires maturity and a proper reasoning skills, and that is why applied ethics is going to be important in your future exams. After this, then comes the quote based questions. So in quote based questions, you have 3A, 3B and 3C. So in 3A, they had asked about a quote given by Thiruvullavar, and that was more or less on how to be calm during stress. Though the quote was seemingly a little complicated, but it is a very simple and very effective quote, and you could have written a good answer to it. Okay, so that is being calm under stress. The second quote is a psychology quote. It's a psychological quote, or a quote that is on the realm of psychology, where it talks about how attitude will alter life. Okay, so on the basis of attitude and your knowledge about attitude, you should try to talk about how it can alter life. Okay, so this was given by William James. William James is also an American psychologist, but anyways, that is not important. How you will analyze this quote with what does it mean to you, that becomes very important in this particular quotes. Okay, the third one again is a very interesting and easy quote given by Swami Vivekananda, where it talks about the importance of morality over law. So basically here you have to prove that morality is much more broader compared to law. So this is more or less the quotes. So my takeaway when it comes to the quote based questions is, when I spoke to most of my students after finishing mains, one thing what I felt is they have more or less written one point again and again. So there is always a problem of redundancy when they write quote based questions. The second problem is they just fill up on examples. So when they say that altitude, so when they say that attitude can alter life, you try to bring different examples and just dump it there. That will not fetch you more marks. Okay, that is okay. I'm not telling that it is wrong, but that will not fetch you more marks. You have to bring analysis of why that particular quote is important, bring some contemporary relevance to it, bring some parallel philosophies that also at least agree to it or disagree to it. So you should try to break that particular quote and try to analyze and bring it back together. That is where you get good marks. And if you want to understand that, keep seeing the video until you finish the entire ethics paper.
Now, after looking at the applied ethics questions and after looking at code-based questions, now one question will always be asked in the realm of international relations in ethics. So this time they had asked that question in 2A. So ethics in international relations. So they had asked about a thinker who has given the quote, that is Karl von Clausewitz. He has given a quote that war is a diplomacy by other means. War is a diplomacy by other means. So what I understood when I spoke to my students of written means is they were able to understand the meaning. They were able to understand the meaning of what is this, what is war is a diplomacy by other means. They were able to understand. But one mistake that most of my students who have committed is the stand that they have taken. They should not stand with this particular quote, because this quote will legitimize war. It should not be taken as a pro stand. This is against another theory given by Augustine, and that theory is just war theory. Now, that just war theory tells that war can only be legitimized if that purpose or intent of going for a war is ethical. Okay, we will speak about that when we are dealing with this particular question, but one thing what you should understand is what is very, very important is the stand that you take. That is why I told you in this paper, your moral or ethical reasoning becomes very, very important. How to develop that moral and ethical reasoning is to practice a lot of such applied ethics questions or code-based questions. Okay, then you will develop the ability to bring that philosophy and give a comparative analysis of other philosophies and tell why other philosophies are better than this. Otherwise, what happens, because you do not have the depth of other philosophies, you will end up just substantiating whatever they give. Here, most of the students who have written this particular answer have substantiated what Karl von Clausewitz has given and not tried to give other comparative theories and told that no, war is not diplomacy by other means, war cannot be legitimized. If you have taken that stand, that is wonderful. That means your moral maturity is very good and your ethical depth is exactly up to the UPSC standards. Now, the next part is the conventional questions. Okay, the conventional questions. Obviously, in every question paper, there will always be conventional questions that you can expect the questions to come, and they have come as we expected. So, amongst the conventional questions, the first question is, how does constitutional morality help civil servants in promoting good governance and accountability? Promoting good governance and accountability. Again, everyone will know what is constitutional morality. So you can use the values of the constitution and then tell how does it help in good governance as well as how does it help in accountability. It can be using the values of liberty, equality, compassion towards weaker sections. You can use those values and you can just attach it to how does it promote good governance. Okay, or you can use answerability, transparency, and how that in turn will enhance accountability. So more or less this answer, more or less everyone would have practiced and everyone would have written a very good answer. The next conventional question was 4B. 4B is teachings of Mahavira, but after that teachings you should take and you should attach it to how is it important in contemporary times. So I think you would have done a very good job because such questions keep coming up in the mock tests, and I think you could have done a good job. Now, teachings of Mahavira, if you know the teachings of Jainism, you can apply the teachings of Jainism as teachings of Mahavira and write a very, very good answer on this. Again, a conventional question, and I hope that everyone would have done a good job. The next question is 5A. 5A is devotion to duty of a civil servant, and how does it help in two variables. One, it helps in sense of responsibility, and the second one is personal fulfillment. How this sense of responsibility and personal fulfillment, that is an outcome of devotion and duty, will help attain the highest perfection in life.
will help attain highest perfection in life. So this is, again, there are a lot of variables here. You have to play around with the variables, but the answer is not that difficult. You can write a very good answer. The only thing you have to connect is devotion to duty, sense of responsibility. The next is devotion to duty, personal fulfillment. And how sense of responsibility and personal fulfillment will overall help in attaining perfection in life for a civil servant. This is all you have to play around with. So again, an answer that you might have. So again, an answer that you would have practiced in the mock test. The next question is 5B, that is civil servants as enablers and facilitators than regulators. Okay, again a straightforward question. You could have written a very good answer. So a civil servant, instead of trying to control different things, they have to enable and they have to flourish good things to happen. So on that narrative, you have to construct a very good answer, which I know that you people would have done a very good job in. The next question, that is again coming from the conventional syllabus, is 6A. 6A is more or less talking about code of ethics in every organization. Code of ethics in every organization. So this is another important question. Last year also they have asked on code of conduct and code of ethics both together, I think in question 5A if I have not mistaken, and this year they are asking it in question 6A on code of ethics in every organization and the necessity and the need for such code of ethics. Again a straightforward answer. You could have written a very good answer. So overall, under conventional topics, 5 questions have come directly. Now if you can observe, in the previous years, when I say conventional questions, the question used to be on attitude, the question used to be an aptitude, the question used to be on emotional intelligence, the question used to be on values like probity, integrity, happiness. See, all those questions are gone. There is no more such conventional straightforward questions that are being asked. Even in conventional syllabus or conventional topics, they are asking you a little bit more of analytical questions. Hence you need a little bit more depth in your ethical vocabulary and in your moral reasoning, not just definitions and examples. Alright guys, now you have seen the change in trend of this year's ethics paper in Mains 2025 compared to the previous years. Now overall, to summarize, this is very very important, so listen to me, because this acts as your framework for your preparation for the next year's ethics paper in UPSC Mains 2026. So listen to this carefully. So this is some things that you should keep in your mind when you're practicing the ethics paper for the next year. The first thing is practice a lot of applied ethics questions. Okay, applied ethics is going to stay and there will be a lot of questions on applied ethics that is going to come. So whatever you're reading in your current issues, try to take those issues and look at it from ethical perspectives. That should act as a practice for your applied ethics. So make sure that you work on the applied ethics. When I say work on applied ethics, it doesn't mean reading. It definitely doesn't mean reading, it means writing. When I say writing, it means applying your ethical knowledge or ethical content on current issues. So you need to learn to do it. You will not get any books that are going to give it. There will be few books that will try to or attempt to give a few issues from ethical perspective. Again, those will be copy pasted from chat GPT or anything. It will not be original. So keep writing a lot of answers on your own by applying that particular issue with whatever ethical content that you have in your notes. That should come from your own, and only if it comes from your own, it will look original and you'll get more marks. So that is the first takeaway. The second important takeaway is when it comes to conventional topics, they are not asking direct questions. For example, there is no question on emotional intelligence, there is no question on attitude, there is no question on aptitude. Though they are not asking direct questions, indirectly you can use the content. However, one thing what you should understand is, don't just keep collecting definitions and examples. Okay, yes, you can collect it for all the keywords that is there, but that is not the end of it. All right, conventional topics, the questions now are asked that are more analytical in nature. So for analytical questions, you have to develop the art of moral reasoning. If you don't develop the art of moral reasoning, then you will not show depth in your answers, and that immaturity will actually result in less marks. So try to develop a lot of moral reasoning. Again, the moral reasoning comes with a lot of answer writing. It will not come from reading many books. So stick to your notes, revise them, but write a lot of answers. The third point is very important. I have observed this and I'm telling you. The third is they have started to ask very close questions. Okay, when I say very close questions, what does it mean? Look at this. With respect to civil servants, in UPSC Mains 2025, they've asked 4 questions. One question is on how constitutional morality will help civil servants have or promote good governance and accountability. This is the first question. The next, they have asked about how devotion to duty will help in sense of responsibility and personal fulfillment. This is the second question. The third question they have asked is civil servants should act as facilitators and enablers rather than regulators. This is the third question. The fourth question is they have asked about how civil servants should help in social re-engineering of welfare schemes. As you can see, 4 questions have revolved around civil servants. Now what happens is, in that constrained time limit, when students are in a hurry to finish that question and jump to the next one, usually it becomes difficult for you to create a difference when the questions are so closely interlinked. Here is where a lot of people will keep writing the same points in different answers. That will create redundancy, that in turn can be a reason for a reduction of marks. So this is one other thing that you should be careful when you're practicing for the next year's UPSC 2026 Mains Ethics paper. The fourth important takeaway from the UPSC 2025 ethics paper is quote-based questions. Okay, so we all know that the quote-based questions will be 3A, 3B and 3C. This has been the trend from the previous years. But if you take the last year, that is 2024 and 2025, the quotes have been a little interesting, and the quote requires some form of analysis, because the quotes are given in such a way that many students will just dump examples in it and come. That will not fetch them more marks. One more observation what I have done is, before what we used to do is, when we approach the quote-based questions, we used to approach it spontaneously. That is, there used to be no preparation when it comes to quote-based approach or quote-based questions. We used to just go, read that particular quote, whatever analysis that we can do from reading and understanding that quote in that time period, we used to just write it and come. But now what happens in the last 2 years, if you approach spontaneously these quotes, the problem what happens is redundancy. That is, what will you do is, you will start telling the same point in different ways. Instead of analyzing, you are going to repeat yourself by telling it in different dimensions. This is one problem that I have seen. So one takeaway that you have to do for the next year UPSC 2026 is practice quote-based questions. Practice a lot of quote-based questions, especially the previous year questions of UPSC. If you can practice the last 10 years of previous year question of UPSC, that itself will form around 30 quotes, and you have written the answer for that. Not only would have practiced the quote-based questions, but the answers that you have written can become content for your other answers also. So please practice quote-based questions, because quote-based questions have to follow a systematic approach. I have taught my students who have written mains in Advanced Mains Masterclass how to follow a systematic approach in code-based questions. But anyways, it is not a rocket science. Each and everyone can learn about it. But one thing you should keep in your mind is, when you practice code-based questions, there has to be some systematic way to approach it. There has to be some structured way to approach it. You cannot just randomly write whatever comes to your mind just because you understand the meaning of the quote. That is the problem that is happening. You should approach it in a very systematic and structured manner. So this is another takeaway in this year's ethics paper. So these were some of the important takeaways from my side for all my students who are preparing for the next year mains of UPSC 2026. Overall, if you take difficult questions of this year's ethics, the first question that I felt difficult was 2A. That is the quote given by Karl von Clausewitz, that is, war is diplomacy by other means. Now here, as I told you, the difficulty is not about understanding the code, the difficulty is the stand. Many students have taken the stand for this. This is like legitimizing war. You shouldn't have taken the stand. That is why it becomes difficult, and hence I am putting this under the difficult category. The next difficult question that I felt is 6B. Here they have talked about India becoming an economic superpower. Okay, and here they have spoken about the challenges, what can be the challenges and what would you recommend. So here, though the question seems to be easy, to bring ethical vocabulary and write from ethical perspective is a little challenging, and that is where I feel that this question was a little difficult. Apart from that, the next one is 4a. In 4a, they have spoken about social re-engineering. Okay, here two things. One, to give the clarity to the examiner what social re-engineering is a very important aspect that students have missed out. The second is you have to first give the meaning of it to tell the examiner that you have clarity of what social re-engineering is and why that social re-engineering is necessary in welfare programs. So that is very, very important. So giving clarity. The second aspect is connecting this in the welfare's program when you're talking regarding the civil servants and implementation of welfare schemes. How the social engineering is very important. So that connectivity aspect in the answer also becomes very important. So because it acts, because the demand necessitates you connecting social re-engineering to welfare schemes, I feel that this again is a little relatively difficult compared to the other questions. So overall, I felt that these three were relatively difficult questions, and apart from these three, all the other questions were doable, and many of my students have done a wonderful job with that. So I'm really happy for it, and I hope all those students who are aspiring to write next year will be writing the answers with me in this Decode Mains 2025. Now, before we jump to the case study and analyze how the case studies this year has been, let us just go back to the questions from 1A to 6B, read it out and understand whatever I told you makes sense or not. Let us do that. Now let us go through the questions, and when I am reading out the questions, you should recollect whatever I have told in the analysis part. Alright, let us go ahead with it. The first question is 1A. As you can see, in the present digital age, social media has revolutionized our way of communication and interaction. However, it has raised several ethical issues and challenges. Describe key ethical dilemmas in this regard. Okay, so this question is talking about how social media is creating different types of ethical dilemma. It can be in the form of privacy versus connectivity. It can be in the form of free speech versus hate. This is how you have to go ahead and structure the answer. A straightforward answer, and the question is mainly coming from applied ethics, as I've already given you the hint. Okay, the next one, 1B, is constitutional morality is not a natural sentiment but a product of civil education and adherence to the rule of law. Okay, examine the significance of constitutional morality for public servant, highlighting the role in promoting good governance and ensuring accountability in public administration. Okay, so basically here it is two parts. Don't jump directly to the civil servant part. Here you should tell how constitutional morality can be trained and it can be educated in any individual. Okay, this is the part that you have to talk about. What is constitutional morality, how it can be trained and educated in any individual. And then you should come to how constitutional morality can help civil servants in promoting good governance and accountability. So this is how you have to create two parts and answer them. Very straightforward, and I know that you would have done a very good job. The next question is 2A. Karl von Clausewitz once said, war is a diplomacy by other means. Critically analyze the above statement in the present context of contemporary geopolitical conflicts. Okay, again this is ethics in international relations. A very interesting quote given by Karl von Clausewitz, which we will discuss in detail when we are writing the answer. But as I have kept on telling you, the stand that you should take should always be just war theory and not this. So overall we will discuss how it is when we are writing the answer. So this is 2A. Let us go to 2B. 2B is, keeping the national security in mind, examine the ethical dilemmas related to granting environmental clearances of developmental projects in ecologically sensitive border areas in the country. Okay, so three variables are being asked in this question, so use those variables in your answers. The three variables are, one, they are asking about environmental clearances. The second variable is ecologically sensitive areas. And the third variable is border areas. Okay, so these are the three variables you have to play around with. I will show you how to play around with these three variables and write a very good answer in the upcoming part of the video. Now let us look at the code based questions, that is 3A, 3B and 3C. So 3A, the question is as follows: those who in trouble, untroubled are, will trouble itself. Thiruvullavar. As I told you, it may seem a little confusing, but it is not. It is a very straightforward quote. But mainly what happens is you keep adding examples. That should not be the way you have to write a quote based ethics question. Okay, how to write we'll try to decipher and learn in a few minutes, but overall this is talking in simple words that if an individual remains calm and composed in difficult times, then the power of the problem itself will weaken. The power of the problem itself will weaken. So that is what this particular quote is talking about. A very good quote you can analyze in a very nice manner. The second quote is again a very straightforward one. The greatest discovery of my generation is that human being can alter his life by altering his attitude. Okay, again here there are two parts. If you can answer those two parts, your entire answer is complete. What are the two parts? One, how they can alter their life by altering attitude. This is one thing that you have to address. So this is the first part. The second part is how that becomes the greatest discovery. Okay, so if you can address these two parts, okay, how by altering altitude one can alter his or her life. The second is how that becomes the greatest discovery of this generation, that is his generation. That is what you have to address. So if you can address these two parts, more or less the quote is done. The next quote is 3C. The strength of the society is not in the laws but in the morality of its people. Again, Swami Vivekananda has given it very straightforward. You have to talk about how morality is much greater than law. Here laws basically provide external regulation, whereas morality is intrinsic and shapes virtues to do the right thing. So overall you have to argue on these lines and tell that how morality will help increase the strength of the society. Okay, so overall this should be the essence of it. Again, a very straightforward quote. Let us go to the 4A now. 4A is for any kind of social re-engineering by successfully implementing welfare schemes, a civil servant must use reason and critical thinking in an ethical framework. Justify this statement with suitable examples. So basically here you have to talk about what is social re-engineering. Okay, that is very important to show that since it's a technical word, you have to show the clarity in that. And then you have to tell how civil servants must use reasoning and critical thinking in order to implement the welfare schemes for social re-engineering. Okay, again two parts here. One is how civil servants can use reasoning in the welfare schemes to create social re-engineering. The second part is how civil servants can use critical thinking to help implement welfare schemes to create social re-engineering. So these two parts can be very nicely told. If you can just recall good examples of social re-engineering, you can write a very good answer for this. This obviously we will discuss more in detail when we are writing answers together. So let us move to the next one, that is 4B. So in 4B, what are the major teachings of Mahavir? Explain their relevance in contemporary world. Again, a direct question. If you can know the teachings of Jainism, that teachings themselves, they can be put as the teachings of Mahavira and be written. But what is very important is the second part. How are you going to connect the teaching to the contemporary world? They had asked about Buddhism, the teachings of Buddhism and contemporary world. Now they are asking about Mahavira and contemporary world. So again, a direct question that I hope that you people have practiced in your mock tests, or if you are writing for the next year, try to practice them. So Indian philosophies, you have to practice how they are relevant to contemporary times. That is very important. The next question is 5A. If you look at 5A, one who is devoted to one's duty attains highest perfection in life. Analyze this statement with reference to sense of responsibility and personal fulfillment as a civil servant. Again, too many variables are there. Don't get confused. Segregate them. Look at this. They are asking you devotion to duty. Okay. How devotion to duty will help in sense of responsibility. That is one part that you will answer. The second part is how devotion of duty will help in personal fulfillment, and how both this personal fulfillment and sense of responsibility will help you attain the highest perfection in life as a civil servant.
Okay, so you have to just use the variables to structure the answer. Don't try to take all the variables together in the answer. That will become confusing for you as well as the evaluator. So try to segregate those variables and try to use few variables in one structure and the second variable in the other structure. So that will kind of create an order and it will not confuse the evaluator also. The next question is 5B. To achieve holistic development goal, a civil servant acts as an enabler and active facilitator of growth rather than regulator. What specific measures will you suggest to achieve this goal? Again, a very direct question. If you have practiced the previous year questions, you could have written a very good answer. For example, in the previous years, they were asking what's the difference between a civil servant who has a good attitude or a positive attitude compared to a person who has a negative attitude. So that was one question that was asked. Another question that was asked in the same realm was, what is the difference between a civil servant who follows the law in its letter to that civil servant who follows the law to its letter and spirit? So these questions, if you have practiced in the previous year questions, you can write an answer, a very good answer in this question as well. The next is 6A. 6A is, it is said that for an ethical work culture, there must be a code of ethics in place in every organization to ensure value-based and compliance-based work culture. What suitable measures would you adopt in your workplace? Again, here what you should not forget is opinion. Okay, so when you are giving opinion, if you tell a measure that you want to adopt, you have to tell the reason why you have to adopt that particular measure. Why do you feel that you have to adopt in your work culture? So bringing that you becomes very, very important. This is where a lot of people might skip, but you should talk about your opinion in your work culture and why do you think that it has to be adopted in your work culture, so that it should not be neglected and should be brought forth in the answer. The next and the last question of ethics theory is 6B. Look at this. India is an emerging economic power of the world and it has recently secured the status of 4th largest economy of the world as per the IMF projection. However, it has been observed that in some sectors allotted funds remain either underutilized or misutilized. What specific measures would you recommend for ensuring accountability in this regard to stop leakages and gaining the status of 3rd largest economy in the world? Okay, so basically there is two aspects to it: underutilization and misutilization. Okay, so you have to talk in the realm of underutilization and misutilization of public funds and how you can overcome that, and in turn how it can help in India becoming an economic superpower. So again, this comes in the realm of applied ethics. Again, if you have practiced in applied ethics, it becomes very easy. Now whenever I say applied ethics, why do I keep pointing it out that applied ethics is? In applied ethics, if you have not practiced, then you will not be able to bring ethical perspective in current issues. For example, last year they have asked about artificial intelligence, they had asked about climate change and global warming. There many students had written a lot of science and technology perspective, a lot of environmental perspective instead of ethical perspective. That's why whenever I come across applied ethics, I keep pointing it out, because I want you people to practice the application of ethics in current issues. Then and only then you will be able to write a very good answer. So keep that in your mind. Again, this is an applied ethics which we'll practice in a few minutes in the next part, and I hope that you people will be ready to write the answers with me. Alright guys, so now we have finished the analysis of the section A of ethics paper of 2025 mains, and I hope you got an idea of what are the changes happening or what are the trends that you can take away from this year's 2025 ethics paper. The second is what should be your approach if you are preparing for the next year mains 2026. Now that is the section A. Now let us jump to the section B, that is the case studies. Now these are some of my takeaways of ethics case study of the 2025 mains ethics paper. The first is, overall if you look at the cases or case studies, the case studies were on the easier side. Why I say easier side is, there was nothing confusing about the case studies. It always follows the same pattern of creating an ethical dilemma and asking you to solve the ethical dilemma by telling you which is the best option to choose. So overall all the 6 case studies followed the same pattern. Few people say MG and Rega was a little tricky. It is not. It is completely straightforward. It is just that the way they have written it is a little different. Just because they have created points, it is not difficult. Overall the case studies were on the easier side. If you see, they will give you the case study. They'll ask you what are the ethical issues involved, what are the different options available, what is the best option that you should take. So overall in the 6 case studies they follow the same pattern. Actually in 2024, in 3 case studies they had actually planted a narrative to see you will get influenced by that narrative. This time they have taken out the narrative. They have not even introduced any narrative in any case study. It is kind kind of very straightforward. Now, because the case studies are very straightforward, most of the students have finished the paper, which is a very good news, because finishing the paper in ethics is itself a very important ability that many students will not be able to do. So if you have finished the paper in ethics, that means that you are already done a very good job. So just to summarize, my observation of this year's case study is: 1, you have to develop the habit of understanding and identifying what are the ethical issues in any case study. Because one thing what I have observed is many people will be able to look at the core ethical issues, but a lot of people will neglect the peripheral ethical issues. For example, if I have to illustrate in this year's case study itself, in the case study called 2A, in case study 2A is mainly a case study that talks about environmental protection versus building homes to homeless in ecologically sensitive areas. Okay, so overall, broadly, you will look at this as the core issue and you will talk about this core issue in depth. Yes, but what you should not neglect is there are 2 important peripheral issues that they have put in this particular case study. What is the peripheral issue? The first one is, it says forest can be cleared as these forests are used as hideouts by antisocial elements. Look at this. How is this true? And if you don't address this, you have neglected this issue altogether. The second peripheral issue that they have included in the same case study is, they say that forests have created human wildlife conflict. Okay, so this is another statement that they have inserted in the case study to check, are you able to recognize the ethical issue here? Just because there is rising human wildlife conflict, that doesn't mean that we have to deprioritize environmental protection and we have to destroy forests. That is something that you should keep an eye for. That is why I'm telling you that you have to practice taking the case study and identifying the ethical issues. Why? Because many people, 99.9% of the people who are writing mains will identify core issues. Very less people will identify the peripheral issues. If you can identify the peripheral issues, that means you have got a very good edge in getting good marks in case studies. The second important thing that I want you to do when you practice case study is, the second is identify or develop ability to identify ethical dilemma. There will not be only one, there will be one or more dilemma. So you should practice identifying these ethical dilemmas. They are very important, and every case study they'll keep putting the dilemmas and asking you to identify those dilemmas. So if you can identify many dilemmas that are there, that means that you have got a good depth in understanding ethical issues and in developing moral reasoning. So how to develop that skill of identifying ethical dilemmas when I'm reading the case study is, try to understand the stakeholders. So if you understand the stakeholders, let us say that there is A, B, C and D stakeholders, then if you know all the stakeholders, try to see the combination of which actors will create a dilemma. For example, let me illustrate taking the case study 3 of this year's 2025. So in the third case study, if you take, there is an officer who is a secretary of PWD department. Now there is one dilemma with his son, there is another dilemma with the minister, there is another dilemma with the minister's nephew. So how do I know that there are 3 different dilemmas? Because I know that there are 4 actors, and among the 4 actors there are 3 different dilemmas. So that is how you first identify the stakeholders. Once you identify all the stakeholders, then you will be able to identify what are the different dilemmas between the stakeholders. So this is one way of identifying the ethical dilemmas when they give you a case study. So these are the 2 important things that you have to keep practicing when you are writing case studies. That is identifying the ethical issues, not only the core but the periphery, and identifying the ethical dilemma within the case study. The third important thing that I want you people to always practice is, when they tell you which is the most suitable option, many students will just illustrate the steps to be taken to solve the ethical issue. No one will try to ethically justify the steps. So this ethical justification or this moral reasoning
becomes very, very important. So when you are taking a step, you have to ethically tell that this step 1 should be taken because of this moral reasoning, this step 2 should be taken because of this moral reasoning. So that moral reasoning or ethical justification for the steps being taken is very, very important. If you don't justify ethically, that means that you are just writing English. If you write English, you will not get good marks in your case studies. So keep these 3 things in your mind. One is identifying ethical issues, identifying ethical dilemmas, and always morally or ethically justifying whatever steps that you take which you feel that is the most suitable options. So this was my takeaway of this year's case study, and I hope that if you can practice, case studies are very easy and you can actually get very good marks from them. Now let us briefly touch upon the 6 case studies and what were their demand. Now if you look at the case study 1, I have myself summarized the case study to exactly what is needed, and then I'll just give you the dilemma that is there in that particular case study. So you're looking at the first case. The first case is Vijay faces a profound conflict between his duty as a public servant leading disaster relief operations and his personal obligation to perform the last rites of his deceased mother. Again, it's a very, very emotionally close dilemma. You should be very, very careful how you balance it. So this dilemma is basically about duty versus personal obligations. Okay, now in the personal obligations, they have created extra weightage by telling that there is no close relative and your elder sister or Vijay's elder sister is in USA. So that creates an extra weightage towards personal obligation. Now how will you solve this dilemma depends completely up to you. What ethical justifications and moral reasoning can you bring to solve the dilemma is up to you. But one thing what you should always remember is mother is divine and mother is sacred. So this concept is very emotionally close. So make sure that you are realistic and not theoretical. Now here in this particular case study, his mother has died, he has received the news, he is in a rescue and relief operation. How well can he perform after receiving that news? That is something that you should ponder upon. That is where you have to justify. So on that basis, you can go ahead and break the dilemma. It is all up to you and how well you can justify morally your steps and your suitable option. Let us go to the second case study. The second case study is the dilemma lies in reconciling the constitutional duty to provide housing for the poor with equally critical obligation to conserve ecologically sensitive forest and protect community livelihoods. As the case study suggests that the dilemma is between environmental protection versus the home to homeless in ecologically sensitive areas. Again, this is a case study where you did not take a stand. You can actually or you want to actually balance. Obviously, both the entities are very important. So there is nothing called a dilemma. You have to somehow bring a step in order to break the dilemma and balance both the sides. That is, environmental protection is as important as house to the homeless. So obviously you can bring, but here the trick is, as I told you, there are some peripheral issues and many people will neglect these peripheral issues. So be careful. If you can bring those peripheral issues and address how unethical those peripheral issues can be, then that means that you are going to get that extra points. So this is case study 2. Let us go to the case study 3. Now in this case study 3, it reads, Subhash faces a dual ethical conflict between upholding integrity in public office while resisting pressure from his son for insider information and from his minister for nepotistic favoritism in a major road project. As I told you, this case study involves 4 actors. One is Subhash, another is the minister, Subhash's son, the minister's nephew. Okay, so there is a road project going on. So the minister wants Subhash to help. So the minister wants Subhash to help his nephew, that is nepotism. The next is Subhash's son is also seeking some type of insider information from Subhash. So again, this goes into what we call as political loyalty versus integrity of public office. That is one. The second is personal life versus public life. That is the second. These are the 2 important dilemmas that you have to decipher here and justify. Now here there is no doubt where will you stand. You will always stand towards integrity in public office and you should always stand towards public life over personal gains. So obviously there is no doubt, there is no dilemma actually. You have to always take these stands. If you have not taken these stands, then you are in a problem. Please, so please be very careful. There is no compromise in ethics. Whenever there is something unethical, you have to take a stand and tell that it is unethical and you have to take a stand of ethics. So this is about the case study 3. Let us move to the case 4. So in case 4, you have Rajesh faces the ethical dilemma of either compromising rules by splitting expenditure to please his superior and secure career prospects or upholding financial propriety at the risk of jeopardizing his promotion. So basically here it is a straightforward case study where it is talking about financial integrity versus career progression. Okay, now many people will try to balance, but please don't try to balance. You have to take the side of financial integrity. If you look at the case study, they have given the hint telling that splitting the expenditure is illegal. They have told the sentence explicitly, splitting the expenditure is illegal. It is not illegal. It is not bending the law. They have explicitly told it is illegal. So please don't do that. Please don't try to balance financial integrity with career progression to show that you are innovative. It is wrong. In ethics, there is no innovation to compromise values. Please don't try to be over smart and try to search something in unethical means. That becomes a very, very wrong way to write a case study. Here also there is no balance. You have to take the side of financial integrity because splitting the expenditure is illegal and they have mentioned it very explicitly in the case study. Alright, now let us go to the case 5. In case 5, as district administration, you face the ethical and administrative challenge of correcting large-scale corruption and mismanagement in MG and Rega while restoring transparency, accountability and people's faith in welfare system. As I have written there, it is again a straightforward dilemma where they are talking about correcting systemic flaws versus cover up to avoid conflict. Again, be careful. Don't, here also there is nothing called balancing. You have to correct systemic flaws. So whatever your predecessor has done, you have to overcome it. You have to bring to justice. If you cover up or if you try to protect that predecessor, you are perpetuating injustice and you are compromising the right to work which is guaranteed by law. So that is what you have to talk here. There is nothing called balancing here also. So the last case study, if you take the last case study, Ashok must balance humanitarian duty to protect civilians with national security concerns by aiding refugees while detaining armed soldiers until higher instructions. So in this case study, Ashok is a divisional commissioner in one of the districts in Northeast India, and because it is a border district, there is an influx of refugees. Now that influx of refugees are children and women mainly, but there are also some armed insurgents within that. So this is where, should he allow that refugees to come in? Should he stop them, or should he allow only women and children in stopping that armed insurgency? What is the steps that is going to be? That is what this entire case study is talking about. So overall, two ethical issues that is very important here is humanitarian responsibility. Humanitarian responsibility, that is one ethical issue. The second is national security. The second is national security. So the dilemma here is rule of law versus compassion. The rule of law versus compassion. Again, a straightforward case study. Yes, here you can balance. You can say that women and children have to be protected, but armed insurgents should not be allowed. You can go ahead with that and balance. So one very important thing that you should always know in the case study is you should know where to balance the dilemmas and where you have to take a stand. If you try to balance in everything, then that means that you are going wrong. If you try to compromise, you are going wrong. If you try to bring innovative steps in places where you should not balance, you are going wrong. So be very, very careful in your case studies not to create blunders. If you create blunders, you will lose marks extensively and that will drop your marks by a greater margin. So be very, very careful in your case studies. Alright guys, so I hope this analysis was helpful in section A and in section B. What are the changes that are happening and what should be your approach if you are preparing for the next year mains ethics paper? I hope you have got clarity in that. Now in the next part, let us go ahead and take every question. We'll discuss the structure and we'll write the answer together. So I want you people to write the answer with me, and I hope you people are also ready and as excited as I am. Thank you so much for this part guys. Please make sure that you like, share and subscribe.